Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into a really significant development in a case that's, well, it's captivated and frankly confused so many people. The Bryan Kohberger situation. You've sent us the latest updates, lots of legal takes, and some pretty raw reactions from different sources. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack this sudden guilty plea, really look at the evidence that pushed it forward, and try to understand the complex and sometimes, very conflicting feelings from those most affected.
Yeah, in this case, maybe more than others we've seen, it really highlights a tough question. When the legal system says case closed, does that actually mean closure for everyone involved? What's so fascinating, I think, is seeing how a legal resolution can still live so many basic questions just hanging there. It really shows the gap between legal finality and genuine understanding.
That gap, that tension between the legal side and the personal side, that's exactly what this case shows us, isn't it? Okay, so let's lay out the basic facts first. What happened on July 2nd, 2025? Bryan Kohberger, who was 30 then, a former criminal justice student, he pleaded guilty. Guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder for the awful stabbing deaths of Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin back in November 2022. And he also pleaded guilty to 1 count of felony burglary.
Right, and this plea deal is, well, it's huge because it completely changes the direction here. First off, it takes the death penalty off the table. That's a major point. And in return, he gets 4 life sentences, served one after the other, plus another 10 years for the burglary, and crucially, no right to appeal.
No right to appeal. That sounds pretty final.
It is. That part's key because it means we avoid potentially years, maybe even decades of appeals and legal wrangling. Stuff that often just drags out the pain for the families, and the burglary charge. That suggests he went into the house unlawfully, intending to commit a crime. It adds this layer of premeditation. So this whole agreement meant the trial, which was supposed to happen in August 2025, is now off. He's scheduled for formal sentencing on July 23rd, 2025. That's when the families will have a chance to give their impact statements.
Okay, so it's a swift outcome, legally speaking, but you have to ask, right, what was the evidence? What made him agree to this plea instead of going to trial?
Well, the investigation really zeroed in on a few key things. Primarily DNA. His DNA was found on a knife sheath left at the crime scene. Sources indicate this was probably touch DNA, a direct link putting him right there with the victims. That's powerful. Beyond that, there was cell phone data. Tower records showed his phone pinging in that area multiple times on the time of the murders, and even leading up to it.
So not just on the night itself.
Exactly. It suggests a pattern, maybe surveillance or planning. And then there was actual surveillance video showing his car near the house around that time, too. So you have forensics, you have digital footprints. It seems like it built a very strong case against him.
It sounds compelling, yeah. But even with all that evidence and now the guilty plea, one thing our sources keep highlighting is we still don't have a clear motive.
Yeah.
Publicly, at least. From your perspective, looking at criminal psychology, how often does this happen? A major case resolved with a plea, but the why is just missing, especially with so much public attention.
It is striking and deeply unsettling for a lot of people. I mean, prosecutors mentioned his background in criminology, this possible, dark fascination with crime itself, but nothing concrete, nothing confirmed. And it's not just academic, this lack of motive, it's psychological. For so many people, understanding the why is how they try to process such horrible events. Without it, there's this huge sense of incompleteness for the families, obviously, but also for the public.
That absence of why definitely seems to fuel the really divided reactions we saw from the victims' families. Our sources really brought that out, almost night and day responses.
Absolutely. You had some families like Madison Mogen's and Ethan Chapin's who seemed to welcome the plea deal. You can understand it, right? The thought of a long, painful trial, reliving all the horrific details, years of appeals. Maybe the certainty of life in prison just felt like a form of finality, a way to maybe start healing without that hanging over them.
Yeah, a procedural end, maybe. But then you have others, like the Goncalves family, who are clearly very upset. They called the deal secretive, even cruel. They felt they shut down their chance for a full accounting. They wanted more transparency, a full confession, finding the weapon, knowing if he acted alone, and understanding that motive. It really shows how differently people define justice, doesn't it? Have you seen this kind of split before in big cases?
Oh, definitely. This kind of divergence isn't unique, but the public nature of this crime, the brutality, it makes the split feel particularly sharp here. The Goncalves family's view really highlights that deep need for answers, for understanding that the legal system, especially through a plea bargain, often just can't deliver. Like you said, for some, justice means punishment is served. For others, justice means truth and understanding. When those don't align, you get this exact tension.
So where does this leave you, our listener, trying to make sense of it all? We've seen a legal endpoint. A man pleads guilty. He'll be in prison for life for killing Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. No death penalty, no appeals. The evidence, the DNA, the cell data, the video, it seems like it was very strong. And yet, like we've been saying, there's still this feeling that the story isn't finished.
Right. And maybe connecting this to the bigger picture, it leaves you with a question to think about. When a plea deal like this avoids a public trial, and these really fundamental questions, is that a motive? Why two other roommates were physically unharmed? What happened to the murder weapon when those things stay unanswered? What does justice really mean? Especially for people who need that full accountability, that complete understanding, can you really have closure without all the pieces? It just underlines how hard it is to get both legal finality and, real emotional resolution sometimes. What's the question that sticks with you after diving into this?